Welcome back to my channel, and this episode will be again about the Fuji X100VI. It's a beautiful camera. I just recently posted a video with my introduction to that camera, combining it with a comparison between the other compact camera I have here in the studio, namely the Leica Q3. And what I want to show in this video is a technology which is used in landscape and macro photography and which is built into that beautiful compact camera, and that's called focus bracketing. And if you talk about focus bracketing, some people say focus stacking, others say focus bracketing. I think there's a bit of a confusion out there. Focus bracketing is the process of shooting different frames with a shifted focus in a sequence of images. And if you have that sequence, you can actually go to step number 2 and stack these images into one frame. And that's then called the focus stacking. And the focus bracketing is actually on that camera here. First of all, in the drive mode, if you look into that, we can go down here and then we have here focus bracketing. And there is also a menu entry for that, which you can access in the camera menu. And that's here. And then you have different options, which we'll go through. So that is what this is all about. And I think in this video, we'll have a nice subject, namely a Swiss-made watch. The watch is from one of the independent watchmakers in Switzerland. It's called Chrono Swiss and is one of these brands which do not belong to the large conglomerates like Louis Vuitton or Richemont or the Swatch Group. And by the way, you see here a bit the reflections of my studio light on the dial of the watch, but we'll set this watch nicely in scene, currently placed on a watch stand in the form of a metal roboter. And we want to get everything on that subject in scene and use for this focus stacking, because if I would go close with the X100VI to that watch, and even if I stop down, the most I can do on the camera, it will still be a shallow depth of field and will not get everything in focus. So I want to demonstrate here how this looks like if we do a focus bracketing and then later do the focus stacking and get one frame where everything in the image is sharp and in focus. In order to set the watch even better in scene, I want to use a UV light and point this towards the watch during my shooting when I take consecutive frames in the focus bracketing, and in this way make the lumen on the watch dial glow. Have a look if I switch on that light, how this starts to glow. Very nice. And there's also a lot of structure on the surface of that watch, which I hope we get perfectly caught by the bracketing in terms of focus shift and then stacking this together in one final frame. All right, let's not waste time. Let's get this done. I will start to reassemble my subject and my camera on a tripod here on the table. We'll get my filming camera pointing towards the camera, and then I will demonstrate live how you can use focus bracketing for your advantage in order to overcome a shallow depth of field, and then by stacking together these different frames, getting everything sharp and in focus. Before I start the bracketing, let's talk quickly about shooting parameters. So if we go here, I will shoot every frame at an f8.0, so stop down, and I will shoot at the base ISO of the camera, which is 125. If I would go smaller here, you see this is already in the ISO L, means low area, and the base ISO according to Fuji actually is 125. So let's shoot with that. I'm also shooting in aperture priority, so I let the camera figure out the right shutter speed. You could also go for manual exposure, but in particular if you would do the shooting outside, I think aperture priority is superior because the camera will make sure that every frame is exposed with the correct light. And if you are in manual shooting and light changes in your environment, then you would not have that benefit. So that's what we are going to shoot here. Let's go back here. And I can focus now here and get a single shot done, but we want to go for a focus stacking. And for this, we need to go into drive mode. And then in drive mode, we can go down here to bracketing. And then we have here exposure bracketing, we have film simulation bracketing, we have dynamic range bracketing, and here at the very right hand side is focus bracketing, and that's what we need to activate here now. So I push that joystick here, and then we go into the menu, and in the menu on the main section, you see on the left hand side, I can scroll or toggle between the different main sections here, and we need to go to the camera menu, and then here on page 2 of 3, we find focus bracketing settings, and there are two choices you have here, auto, and you can also go for manual. If you go for manual, I will show this later on, you have to figure out the parameters yourself. If you go for auto, the camera will do the job for you, and I actually think, having done this now several times, that these Fuji cameras are quite well trained to find the right number of frames, the step size, how much you want to shift the focus, and so on. So let's go for auto for a moment. And then we have to specify the interval between consecutive shots. So let's call it the waiting time from one frame to the next when we shoot a series of frames here. So let's go for 1 second here. And now I can specify the start of my sequence, which is always a point closer to the camera. And then I can specify a second point where I wanted the focus to sit, which is away from the camera towards infinity. So let's go into manual focus now, and let's start here at the top of the watch dial. And let's see what we get. First of all, let's also zoom in here, and let's find by focus peaking. This is out of focus. Focus kicks in. This is again out of focus in the other direction. I think this is kind of it. It's really at the end of the scale on the left hand side if you look at the distance scale. So I'm as close to the subject as it can go based on the minimum focusing distance. Then I press OK, and now that yellow label here changes from A to B, and I can now again focus. And now I want to go, actually let's zoom out first. I want to go now to the legs of the robots in the background. So let's see what we can do here. Here we go. Let's again zoom in. Let's go down here. Maybe we zoom in at a different level. Let's get a bit more distance. This is better. So you see here the legs. I think the leg in the background is this one here. That looks good. Let's zoom in further. You see the focus peaking here. Let's see, this is out of focus. Other side is out of focus. It's sitting somewhere here, I think. All right, now let's press display and back. And now we can start the sequence. What I also recommend is to go for a self timer for the first shot. So we go here in the Q menu, and then we take a 2-second self timer for the first shot, and then the sequence will kick off anyway. So let's get this done. And by the way, let's illuminate now the lumen on the dial of the watch with my UV torch here. So let's get this in. Let's see how this looks like. I think this is good. And now we kick the sequence off. Self timer. And now it starts. The camera figured out it needs 41 frames. You see the counter counting upwards. The focus is shifted in the increment the camera figured out, and when these shots are all on the SD card in the camera, we'll take it out, take it into post-processing, use Helicon Focus to actually get these bracketing images stacked into one frame, and that should actually look quite nice. So let's wait for a moment. I like this UV light and how the lumen on the watch dial starts to glow from it. I think this will be a very nice picture if we did everything right. You see how now the legs of the robot are in focus and the dial was fuzzy. Now the sequence is completed. We can switch the light off. And I will also switch the camera off and load now all these images and frames into my MacBook. Here now I have the 41 frames from the bracketing sequence loaded into Lightroom, and I want to show you how shallow the depth of field is even if the camera is stopped down to f8, and it doesn't get that much better if I would further stop down. And this is the first frame I've shot. You remember I focused on the Swiss mate here, and this is really clean and sharp now. There are also some reflections in here which don't belong here. That's very likely from the light. Ignore that it's about the focus bracketing and stacking technique here and not about a super beautiful image for an art gallery. But the watch is beautiful. If you look at the dial here, everything is kind of in focus and sharp already. And this is a limited edition. You see this is limited to 50 pieces, and this is number 7 here. And you also see the moon phase structure here. You see here basically an indication of a black hole, and that's the name of that particular watch. And you see here a little bit of a swirl into that black hole, and a lot of stars, Milky Way type, indicated on the dial. It has a very rough surface on this particular watch here. So quite nice. If we see that the focus is sitting here in the first frame, well, in the background, of course, everything is fuzzy and not sharp. Look at the legs of the robot here. They are definitely not in focus, and that will be fixed in the bracketing sequence and then later in the stacking in Helicon Focus to stack these 41 frames into one single frame where everything is sharp and in focus, as you will see in a moment. For the sake of completeness, let's look into the frame which was shot at the end of the sequence. So that's frame number 41. And you see now here the watch dial is completely fuzzy and out of focus, but in the background, the legs of the robot are super sharp. And that's the last frame in the sequence which the camera by itself in auto mode, we come to manual later, figured out to shoot. And I think we can now look into the stacked image to see that everything will be sharp and in focus. All right, that's the finally stacked image coming from a stacking procedure in Helicon Focus of 41 frames. And now everything is sharp and in focus. Look here, it's sharp and in focus. Look at the background and the legs of the robot, all sharp and in focus. Everything looks fine. And the camera figured out all the parameters by itself. As I said, I will go and show the manual approach in a moment, very briefly. But these Fuji cameras, not only the X100 Mark VI, but also other Fuji cameras, they do very well in automated bracketing in order to figure out the step size and what have you. And that looks really good. It's a nice image now. I also corrected a little bit these light reflections here. There are these randomly distributed spots of whatever it is all over the watch dial, and now it's corrected. No more reflections, looks good. And of course the UV light gives this all a blue glow. And I actually like that a lot. That's the final outcome. That's how focus stacking works. Let's now look into something I need to correct, namely the background here. And the background shows traces of work. This is my working table. Some of these things I could not wipe away. And that's of course not a representative background for a beautiful watch sitting on a robot like we have it here. The whole workflow I showed so far works actually with files in the RAW format. So the Fuji proprietary RAW format. For Helicon Focus, you have to convert them into the Adobe compatible DNG. But in any case, you will not lose any information. But your very final image, very likely most often will be a JPEG like this one here, because that you can use easily in social media or on your website or what have you. And of course, in Photoshop, we can easily remove the background. So let's do this. I push one button here, and then this ugly background will be gone, and I can embed the PNG file into something more beautiful, which is not distracting from the beauty of the watch by dirt on the working table. Last but not least, let me quickly show what happens if in the menu we go under focus bracketing, not to auto, but to manual. And if I go for this option, I have to figure out everything myself. I can go here in the number of frames in the consecutive sequence of images from 0 up to 999, so there is lots of headroom here. I can define the step size, that means the increment in the focus shift from frame to frame, and the interval, which is the waiting time between consecutive shots, we specified already in the auto mode. I actually think that the auto mode works quite well, but if you want to become experimental, it will be fun to play with these parameters here and see if you can even improve the result if you don't let the camera figure out these parameters. So the number of frames, the focus increment, step size, you do it yourself manually. That's of course up to you. That's the way it works. All right, I hope you enjoyed my little presentation here. I hope you also like the final outcome of the image. I love this watch. It's a very nice watch representing actually the black hole in the way I described before when we looked into the final result. And that watch sitting on that robot is even more fun. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel. There's always more to come. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and healthy. And of course, peace out.